Good morning. It is Friday, the 23rd of January. I'm Maeve McMahon, and this is Europe Today, your daily dose of European news and analysis, live here on Euronews. Coming up today, EU leaders gathered in Brussels last night for a 5-hour dinner and tense talks about, among other things, tricky transatlantic ties. Despite the tasty food, the mood seemed to be grim as they discussed Greenland, Ukraine, Mercosur and the Trump peace board. For more on whether this summit was worth the trip to Brussels, we can bring in Shona Murray, who was there till the very early hours of the morning in the summit and is back on the red carpet for us this morning. Shona, what was the mood last night at this summit, and was Donald Trump the elephant in that room? We're having some difficulties there. We're having a couple of difficulties, but not to worry because, of course, the EU leaders debated deep into the night on all the challenges facing the Union. And in fact, coming up to find out exactly what was discussed in the room, we'll be joined by one of them, the Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis, in power since 2019. He's also the president of the centre-right New Democracy Party since January 2016. Affiliated with the European People's Party since coming into office, he's been focusing on economic reforms and attracting FDI. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm happy to take Shona's
Absolutely.
place.
I mean, it's wonderful to have you because as our viewers are probably wondering what goes on at those EU summits, what do you talk about until the early hours of the morning? And last night was rather tense. We see EU leaders visibly exhausted. Prime Minister, is this because of their workload or is this because of Donald Trump?
Well, first of all, I can tell you that these summits are complicated. There are, 27 of us, and if you also include the High Commissioner, the President of the Commission, the President of the Council, it takes a lot of time to go around the table. But I think yesterday was a very good discussion. There is, in spite of the sense of restlessness, a real, sense of purpose about Europe getting its act together. The transatlantic relationship is becoming more complicated. It needs to be managed in a different way.
And was Donald Trump the elephant in the room?
Europe needs to stand up for its own interests. Of course, the US president was mentioned. I think it is good that he made comments to clearly indicate that he wants to de-escalate the situation in Greenland. I think it is very positive that Europe stood up with one voice, maybe with one exception, to defend Denmark and Greenland.
Tell us about the exception.
And the exception is Hungary. This has been the case over the past year, so this should come as no surprise. But I think we found a way to work around this problem and to send.
And what about the other exception? I mean, I watched that video clip from Fico, the Prime Minister of Slovakia, who I believe was sitting right beside you. He was criticising the summit, saying it was a waste of time. He was very critical of EU leadership as well. What did you say to him?
Well, we can look at the glass half empty or we can look at the glass half full. What I can tell you is that the whole strategic autonomy debate is picking up steam. I was one of the first proponents that we need to invest more in our common defence and we need to sort out our competitiveness issues.
But what did you say to him? What do you say to disruptive leaders who sit with you in that room for 5 hours?
Well, I think we all have to be cordial and respectful. And this is also true when it comes to the US-European relationship. It was also reflected in the statements made by Antonio Costa. I think we're all very frank in these discussions. People need to understand we're by ourselves. There are no advisors.
No phones?
No phones. In this case, also no conclusions, which makes it easier to be very open and occasionally quite blunt in expressing our views.
And did you discuss Donald Trump's Board of Peace? We know that Hungary has joined, Bulgaria also joined. What was the consensus on it last night?
I think the consensus is that what has been announced by Donald Trump goes way beyond this UN Security Council mandate. I think it is important that the US is involved in the reconstruction of Gaza. I don't think that we would have had a truce without the involvement of Donald Trump. But I think we also need to recognize that moving forward, what has been established is something in which most European countries cannot join. However, we would like to be part of an arrangement to address the Gaza issue. So if there's a way where we can work with the US, but only for Gaza and only for a limited amount of time, Greece certainly would be very, very happy to take a lead in finding a consensus to do that.
But you don't want to join up?
I don't think we can join what has been currently presented. But we need to work towards ensuring that there is a European presence when it comes to the future of Gaza.
What about Mercosur? Of course, the Greek farmers are thrilled this week because of that vote in the European Parliament to send it to the Court of Justice. What is your view there?
My view is very clear. I mean, there are more benefits than drawbacks when it comes to these big international trade agreements. The Commission President and the President of the Council are going to India. I'll be going to India in a couple of weeks. We need to establish trading relationships with other countries or other groups of countries. We are a medium-sized, open economy. We're the leaders in global shipping. We have every interest in ensuring a rules-based international order that favors free trade.
I wanted to ask you also about Ukraine, of course, and President Zelensky's speech in Davos being very critical, but we will have to leave it there. Thank you so much, Prime Minister, for being with us here live.
Thanks for having me.
On Euronews, on Europe Today. Do come back very soon. I believe we can now try and head back to the EU summit there and bring in our Shona Murray, who we were having a little bit of technical difficulties earlier catching Shona Murray. Good morning, Shona. Lovely to have you with us. Just tell us, bring us up to speed on the mood from the journalist perspective, of course, because the press spent the night on a packed floor trying to report on what exactly was going on inside the room. What was the mood?
Well, Maeve, I've been covering EU summits for a long time, even throughout the challenging moments of the Eurozone debt crisis. And I can say overall the mood, not really with journalists necessarily, but also with politicians, was one that was particularly despondent. Now, we know, obviously, that the issue of tariffs had been averted at the last minute, but the damage to the EU-US relationship has really been very long-lasting. Trust has been very much eroded. If you look at the language throughout the week, Bart de Wever, the Belgian Prime Minister, using language saying that if Europe doesn't unify, it'll be a happy slave of Donald Trump. We also heard from Mark Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada, a NATO ally, saying that the world order is fading and that the might and right of the strongest is basically playing out and the weak must suffer. So it's within that context that we heard about how Europe really needs to move away, diversify away from the United States, become more independent. We heard from the Prime Minister there talking about strategic autonomy. And Ursula von der Leyen, President of the European Commission, really made this point in her press conference.
It was very clear in the discussion that we were successful in withstanding by being firm but non-escalatory and, most importantly, very united. But there was also a discussion on the clarity with which we know that we have to work more and more for an independent Europe. This is not something which happened overnight. This is hard work.
Commission President there, Ursula von der Leyen. And Shona, just what else did leaders there discuss and decide?
Well, it was all very intertwined, Maeve, because really the idea of this summit was an extraordinary summit based on the actions and the language of Donald Trump. So the strategic autonomy piece was important. And then linking onto that was, of course, Mercosur, because we heard from the European Parliament during the week that they had sent the legalities of Mercosur to the European Court of Justice, which will, of course, delay its implementation. So European leaders decided to implement this in a provisional basis to get it going, saying that really the trade agreements now of Mercosur has 700 million people, that needs to be in place if Europe has any chance of being independent from the United States. And of course, there was also a strong discussion on this Board of Peace that you mentioned there with the Greek Prime Minister. The EU has real concerns about the level of this and whether or not it's in contravention of the United Nations Charter. Maeve.
OK, Shona Murray, thank you so much for that live update there from the red carpet there at the EU Council. Well, Ukraine was also discussed last night at that EU summit after President Zelensky's speech at the World Economic Forum in Davos yesterday. The Ukrainian president also held talks with Donald Trump. For more, we can cross over now to Euronews' correspondent Sasha Vakalina, who's been reporting from Switzerland for us all week long. Good morning, Sasha. Just bring us up to speed, please, on Zelensky's speech in Davos. He was very critical of European allies.
I say this is the first time we hear from Ukraine's president this kind of such a harsh criticism for Europe. This is something that Brussels is rather more used to hear from Washington, but not from Zelensky, also the country who wants to be the member of the European Union. He went on about how Europe is not ready to defend itself, first of all, and this is when he gave the example of Greenland. Zelensky also found a term for that, calling it the Greenland mode. And he said this is what Europe has to stop. It has to get out of the Greenland mode. When Europe, as he said, is waiting for somebody to do something one day. Let's take a listen.
Europe needs to know how to defend itself. And if you send 30 or 40 soldiers to Greenland, what is that for? What message does it send? What's the message to Putin, to China?
President Zelensky there comparing as well the EU to Groundhog Day, saying nothing had been done in a year. But meanwhile, Sasha, American, Ukrainian and Russian delegations will be heading to Abu Dhabi today for their first ever trilateral talks since the war began. What should we expect?
This is indeed in itself a sign of a progress made. We also know that Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, he was already in Moscow, is in Moscow, and he met with Putin. Now, these meetings took place while President Trump was meeting President Zelensky here at Davos. So this is the next step for those trilateral talks that are starting today. Now, the tricky part is that after these talks between Putin and Witkoff, the Kremlin said that the problem remains for them, and the main obstacle is the territorial concessions. And this, of course, will be the hardest point for the teams to negotiate and to find some sort of an agreement.
Indeed. Well, we'll keep a very, very close eye on that, Sasha Vakalina. Thank you so much for that live update on the last day of the World Economic Forum in Davos. As I said, for more of Sasha's reporting on that meeting as well later on today, do visit Euronews.com or download our app. But another man who took the main stage in Davos this week was the billionaire Elon Musk. The Tesla and ex-owner spent, though, most of his week trolling Ryanair and threatening to buy Europe's most successful airline. Jakub Janis takes a closer look.
Come fly with me, let's fly away! Michael O'Leary, the Ryanair boss, could have quoted Sinatra in response to Elon Musk calling him an utter idiot on X. The reason for this sudden affection? A fight over Musk's Starlink Wi-Fi on board. In response, Ryanair boss launched a big idiot seat sale with cheap flights for Elon and all the other, quote, idiots, end quote. But away from the noise, how actually do their business models impact us? First, the environment. Ryanair's fleet of more than 600 planes emitted over 60 million tons of CO2 last year. Then again, data centers for X and Grok AI are part of an industry that consumes so many resources that in Ireland and the Netherlands they are threatening drinking supplies and triggering blackout alerts. So neither of them is exactly winning the Greta Thunberg award. Then there are taxes, and both X and Ryanair have Irish head offices. Ryanair hires 26,000 people and paid over 170 million euros in taxes last year. And X? After the recent layoffs, they have just over 100 staff left in Dublin. And thanks to reporting a massive loss, their tax bill was near zero. Finally, Ryanair claims they have a score of 90% satisfied customers. And to be fair, X-users are also very satisfied. Or at least that's what the Russian bots tell me. And yes, both are ruthless, but one is an American eccentric billionaire. And the other is, well, ours? And honestly, I just can't imagine flying to Mars for $16.99. So for that one, I'm voting with my legs. Even if there is never any space for them on board.
Jakub Janis there with a dose of humour to help you digest what has been a very intense news cycle. But we've covered it all for you on Euronews.com. So for more analysis and context on that EU summit that took place here in Brussels last night, or of course on the World Economic Forum that closes today in Davos, do visit Euronews.com or download, of course, our app. Thank you so much, though, for tuning in to Europe Today and to our interview with the Greek Prime Minister. For more as well, you can check out our social media. We've lots of clips as well that we share with you there. But for now, thank you so much for watching. Stay with us here, though, on Euronews.